SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
From the deer stand to the bass boat and everywhere in between, Hunter's Hollow has all you need. Firearms, ammo, bows, fishing rods, and more. The latest in gear and accessories, plus Thunder Hollow Indoor Gun Range. Hunter's Hollow, Highway 6 West, between Oxford and Batesville. Online, huntershollow.com.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Good Friday Eve.
That's exactly right. We should let the folks know we'll be taking a little day off tomorrow, and we'll be playing the best of on the lineup across the SuperTalk network. And so we look forward to a little rest where we remember the sacrifice that our good Lord made for us for our salvation. And then, of course, we'll celebrate his resurrection on Easter Sunday. And that's when all the world saw his incredible power. And, of course, we know that he did it all for us, the ultimate sacrifice. So that's what's upon us. This time last year, not the exact dates, but the situation is when I got the call on Good Friday from the White House Media Affairs Director, come on up and do a show. That was pretty cool. That's an experience I will not ever forget. Perhaps now I can laugh about it, but the most stressful part of that, Rhino, was when we were trying to get through the extensive security checking, as it should be, of course, by the incredibly professional and competent United States Secret Service. That's who handles it when you're at the White House, in the White House compound. And so we're going through that, and poor Houston, our engineer, who was responsible with setting everything up, making it all work. As you know, there's a lot of work involved in that. They didn't like the equipment cases that he was carrying. They said, sir, step outside the fence here. And I'm inside and he's outside. We're just looking at each other thinking, we got about 45 minutes to get all this stuff in and set up so we can go live. And so they summoned additional Secret Service, this time with the dogs that sniff all the equipment, and there was Houston on the outside of the big 12-foot high iron fence there on the sidewalk, literally, with the White House a few 100 yards away, maybe at most 100 yards. And there he is, and he's stressed out. I'm stressed out. I said, hey, look, down the sidewalk, there comes the Secret Service with the dog in tow. And they did a little sniffing and said, okay, you're good to go, and we got in. But that's the aspect of that I won't soon forget, is that everybody else got through, the other 8 radio outlets but us, and that was because something that Secret Service didn't like in those hard cases. But I will say this, you'd much rather them be super careful than the alternative. No big deal. And the wait was maybe 5 minutes. It was just seemed like an eternity, of course, with the clock ticking. Meanwhile, we got a lunar flyby mission underway. Wow. Isn't that something? That was just incredible. I couldn't help but think back to my youth, the Apollo program, the giant Saturn V rocket taking off, breaking the surly bonds of Earth and headed up to the moon. Not going to land on it, just orbit around it. Then that's essentially the same sequence we followed, as you recall, in preparation for, was it Apollo 10, the mission that ultimately landed on the moon's surface?
11.
11, okay.
Apollo 8 was the first to orbit.
All right, which
is like the Artemis 2. It's going to be the first of this new generation of technology to orbit, to test the technology, make sure that they can safely navigate to the moon, orbit the moon, return from the moon. And that's another thing that kind of gets glossed over is for the last, generation or two, since 72, all of the flights coming back from low Earth orbit have come back from low Earth orbit. It's less time for the gravity to pull them down, so they're going at a slightly reduced speed compared to the speed they'll be coming back from the moon at.
Yeah.
So they have to test whether or not they believe they can, beyond a shadow of a doubt, or they wouldn't be up there, but whether or not they can slow down enough to re-enter the atmosphere. All those things they got to test with the new technology.
Exactly. And again, though, it's incredible. Same sequence, but it's logical. It makes sense. Hey, let's go toward it. Let's fly to it. Let's orbit, check it all out, make sure all this stuff works properly before we take on a mission where we actually send somebody to the surface. And that's what's going on here. So I remember all that vividly. Back in the 60s, hard to believe it was been that long. 69, was it July 10th? I seem to recall. Was that the date?
Sounds right.
We actually landed on the moon's surface. Now, as you know, there are lots of conspiracy theorists that don't believe that ever occurred. And that's interesting fodder, shall we say, to consume is the way I would put it. But that's what's happening right now. That's pretty cool. Those bright orange spacesuits are pretty neat, too, as compared to the old NASA white suits. Very impressive, no doubt about it. And by the way, what about SpaceX going public at $1 trillion? Is what the opening valuation is. I think that's the highest ever for a newly formed public company there, as a public company, I should say. So
they also raised questions about Amazon's satellite systems and whether or not Amazon is actually hitting the target altitude for their satellites, or whether or not they're endangering others by not sharing information on missing their target altitudes. They filed that with who did they file that with? The FAA?
Man.
But yeah, I saw that filing this morning.
Huh. Well, I think, last I checked,
the kind of stuff you never thought you'd really be talking about.
Right.
Private companies talking about, hey,
it's incredible.
This is our level.
Yeah.
Go back to your level.
Yeah. That is
You're
incredible.
messing up our satellites.
So, SpaceX may be the fastest growing business in America, and Silicon Valley and other investors pouring billions into the issue. So, going public at $1 trillion share listing, that's just phenomenal to think about. Phenomenal, no doubt. The initial public offering coming out with a valuation of $1 trillion. Now, last evening, the president, he addressed the nation in prime time. And the first takeaway from that, to me, was it was a relatively short speech. 19 minutes, to be exact. That's unusual for the president.
I mean, they'd ask all the major broadcast entities to carve out 20 minutes for him.
Okay.
To the point that they literally paused Survivor, cut to the president, started back Survivor.
Well, 19 minutes, and my takeaways are I thought the president did well in that he was succinct, he was direct, he was on point. I thought he did a good job of laying out the case for this action. And the other thing I noted, Rhino, was that his tone and tenor, his demeanor, were very presidential, very factual, very much in control of the situation. He said, we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. Here's what rattled the markets. Now, by the way, the markets have had about an 850-point swing this morning. It's just phenomenal. Here's what rattled the markets, though, is that he said we're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong. In the meantime, discussions are ongoing. So what rattled the markets is that expectations were he's going to tell us that we're exiting and when we're exiting. And he's going to give us some sort of news that indicates total victory resolution now, as opposed to we need 2-3 weeks of really heavy, severe attacks. But that's what he indicated last night. And he urged the American people to keep this war in perspective. He's sensitive to the criticism of a potential protracted conflict and the effect it's having on the economy and specifically oil. But he asked people to be patient. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio. Phil Kerpen, President, American Commitment at 10:35.
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Middays with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
Well, the south side of Chicago is the baddest part of town. And if you go down there, you better just beware of a man named Leroy Brown. Now, Leroy, morning trouble. You see, you stand about 6'4".
Also on the program today, Bob Ghetti, host of SuperTalk Eagle Hour. It's the Eagle Hour's 10th anniversary. 2-hour show on Friday to celebrate hitting the 10-year mark. Congratulations to Bob. He does a great job with that show, by the way. And he's a true blue, dyed-in-the-wool Southern Miss fan. That's what's cool to hear him talk about Southern Miss sports and just how passionate he is about it. And so congratulations to him. I always enjoy seeing him on the situations where we do remotes on the same day. So the president, again, I got to tell you, I was just super impressed with his demeanor, his tone, his tenor. Although, I must admit, it fell short of expectations. And it certainly fell short of investor expectations. And here's what we know. And I think if there's one thing about markets that's become crystal clear since this war started, is when the price of oil is going up, the markets are going down, and vice versa. And that is because, despite what the Democrats in this country say, it turns out fossil fuels is a critical input to every aspect of our economy. Because nothing can function without energy. Nothing. And when we decided, or shouldn't say decided, but when inventors determined that, hey, this stuff that comes out of the ground, we can actually make energy out of it. Think about it. That launched us into essentially a new renaissance. We're still relying on that to power our world. 103 million barrels a day, I think, is the latest data I saw.
And if you really want to get to the nitty-gritty, all the greenies and the hippies and the Save the Whales people that fought tooth and nail against nuclear in the 70s under Carter and have continued that fight against nuclear all these years, if they had just, read a book, talked to an expert, or maybe sat their stupid tails down and shut up, we likely wouldn't be relying as much on fossil fuels in the year of our Lord 2026.
That's a great point. That is absolutely
so
a
maybe
great point.
We should learn from the lessons of the past and tell all these loony liberals to sit down and shut up.
That's a great point. We'd be much further along in the development of other forms of energy, such as nuclear, and they stood in the gap on that, and here we are now. We're behind in that respect. Honestly, thank God, due to American innovation, we learned how to frack and get to this oil horizontally and through all the various technologies used in the fracking process. I can't tell you I'm an expert on that. I just know there's a lot of technology involved in that. An American invention that changed the landscape of oil in the country and in the world, because in the 70s, think about it.
In simplest terms, think of it upside down. You got a coffee filter, put the coffee grounds in there, you pour the water in, the coffee comes out slowly. Now imagine you got several layers of coffee filters, how slow the coffee is going to come out. Fracking pokes holes in the coffee filters.
Okay.
So it allows the coffee to flow more freely.
Makes sense.
Same thing upside down. Fracking under pressure, cracks open what it would normally take a long time to get oil through so that oil can flow more freely.
And so I think it's fair to say that the term fracking used to describe the process refers to the ability to literally split the layers of sands under the surface to get to that oil, to literally frack it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is fascinating technology, and I think back, I was just saying, to the 70s when, oh my gosh, all the doom and gloomers, I've talked about this before, came to my high school. I think it was in the 9th grade, 10th grade. By the way, we're going to go to school 3 days a week. Of course, we were celebrating, we're no sports at night. I mean, it was just unbelievable, all the adjustments they were telling us we had to make. Has it changed when you think about the Democrats today? It's always, I talk about this all the time, you just got to do without. No, let's use our brains that God gave us to address this need so that we don't have to do without. They enjoy telling you got to do without. They celebrate it. They thrive on it.
It's because they hate the guy that figures out the solution and makes money off of it.
That's 100% right, and it's exactly why
it's
AOC...
infantile, juvenile envy.
It's exactly right, and it's why AOC and Bernie Sanders have now teamed up to institute a moratorium on data centers. By the way, not because they're worried about the various environmental risks and the potential for the cost of electricity to increase and the depletion of water, all of which is a hoax, by the way, is all a ruse. Not because of that, because these people may make money off of this. We can't have that. They made it clear that's what their primary concern is. Now, I'm a little disturbed by a recent poll that shows 63% of Americans are opposed to using AI in weaponry, military weaponry we're talking about. Are they kidding me? Do they not realize that these operations conducted recently in Venezuela and most recently in Iran, the reason they were so dang successful, that our military is so precise, it's so effective, and we're 32 days in. The president made that point last night. He referred to our history of war and how long so many of those. I think Vietnam, 19 freaking years in Vietnam. What a dang waste. 3, 4, something like that in Korea. I mean, you guys know that these are multi-year conflicts. And he says, we're 32 days into this. We've eliminated their Navy, their Air Force, their ballistic missile capability. He went through the list. I thought that was good. This is a function of amazing American technology being utilized by the United States military. There's no question about that. With minimal losses. Look, every loss of life is paramount, is major. I get that. And I'm sensitive to that. And God bless their families. And eternal gratitude to them for taking up this cause. And he made that point as well last night, did the president. But on a relative basis, there's no comparison. No comparison. Think of everything we've done, still hadn't put ground troops in. Only possible with all this amazing technology only possible in America where you can actually create it and make money off of it. They don't seem to get that. It's amazing how powerful a motivator is profit. Human beings are coin operated. That doesn't mean that money is more valuable than human life. Of course not. But in this case, the profit is actually saving human life. It takes a little second order thinking, as you know, to understand that, make that connection. Because in days gone by, you could only accomplish this with a full-fledged invasion of military personnel in harm's way. Many lives lost. That's the way we'd have to conduct such operations. Haven't even done that yet, and we've decimated the country. So the only thing missing, again, that's causing problems for the American people and the economy, and of course, by connection, markets, is he didn't give us a date certain on when we'll be out. He didn't get that, and you know what? I don't know the reasoning for that. I don't know.
Because in 32 days, we've lost the same number of military service members that we lost in one attack when we told the enemy what day we were leaving.
Good point. That's exactly right. Talking about Afghanistan,
yes.
Right? Yeah. What a joke that was. That's 100% right. Good, great analogy. Thank you. So, look, this is a game of chess. And I think we have all the pieces in our possession. It's just a matter of leveraging them appropriately, effectively, efficiently. And he asked Americans to keep the war in perspective, again, citing the links of the wars in the past, World War I, II, Vietnam, Korea, and Iraq. He talked about that. And he said, this is an investment. I like this statement. This is a true investment in your children and your grandchildren's future. That being said, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If this thing goes on for another month, you're looking at $150 a barrel oil. By the way, that's a 45% increase. You can extrapolate and apply that down to the price per gallon. You're looking at probably $6 a gallon gas and $7 and change diesel, maybe $8. We're stepping aside for a break. Phil Kerpen, President, American Commitment, is up with us next.
From thesebro.com. Gerard Gibert. He keeps his classified documents right where they belong. Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s. Gerard Gibert, SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. We're pleased to welcome now Phil Kerpen, President of the American Commitment. Hey, Phil, thanks for coming on.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So we received some information from you regarding America's broken healthcare system. It's been broken a while, it feels like. I don't know that anybody would say, and I'm talking about not just patients, consumers, the insured, but providers will tell you the same thing. I mean, it's across the board. Everybody thinks that it could be better. I'll just put it that way. And you contend that the insurance industry is a driver, the big insurance industries. Of course, that's about all we have. We got a bunch of small ones, but the big ones account for 80-85% of the commercial coverage, that those are driving the rise in healthcare costs, and everybody seems to be squawking about that, especially with the new year and open enrollment and employers receiving notifications from their group coverage partners and then having to pass that on in some cases to their employees. So it's just a big mess. What do you think?
Yeah, it's been a disaster. We're, I think, 15, 16 years now into Obamacare. And what basically happened is we've got a system where, because of Obamacare regulations, the insurance companies really only make more money when the total claims that they're paying out go up in dollar terms. And so instead of really negotiating hard for lower prices, which is what they would have done before, now they kind of are okay with the prices rising dramatically because that's how they make more money, is they're only allowed to take a certain percentage of all those claims that they pay out. And so the normal incentives that you would have in a market without those regulations are kind of out the window. And what we've had is this massive consolidation of the healthcare sector, both in terms of providers, where these giant hospital systems have gobbled up everyone, and with the insurance companies, where they now own pharmacies and they own a lot of providers themselves, and some of them own banks, and they're just getting larger and larger and larger. And from the standpoint of patients, of consumers, we have fewer choices than ever. In a lot of places, you have like with a one hospital system in town, or maybe two. You've got two insurers and maybe three. And they control everything. And there are not a lot of places you can go if you want to pay less, or if you want a different benefit design, or if you want a different provider. You've got a lot of places where there are still state regulations that say you can't even open a new clinic or imaging center or hospital, even if you want to, unless you get permission from the government, and you can be vetoed by the incumbent provider through a certificate of need process. So we've got just a lot of I'm at my brother's house, and there's a kid yelling, so I apologize for that. These things can happen. I thought I went in the most remote part of the house, but apparently I chose poorly. But we have regulations now that have driven this huge consolidation of everything. We also have payment policies at the federal level that have been extremely destructive in terms of competition and choice, because we've got a situation where Medicare will literally pay more for your same office visit to the same doctor in the same facility if they get bought by a healthcare system, if they get bought by a hospital system. Suddenly that counts as a hospital setting, and now they get an extra payment from Medicare. And so we're literally bribing doctors to end private practice and to join these giant consolidated systems where things are bureaucratized and they're much more expensive. I really think that if we're going to improve healthcare, we've got to reverse all of these consolidation drivers. And we've got to get back to where you can be in private practice without getting crushed by discriminatory payment policies and high regulations, where you can have a wide choice of insurance products, where it's not just one size fits all comprehensive Obamacare plan from one or two providers, but instead, if you want a true traditional indemnification type plan where you're just buying for, the true catastrophic, you're going to pay out of pocket or out of an HSA for the other stuff, that you should have that choice. If you want to subscribe to direct primary care, you should have that choice. And the biggest thing that we've really been talking about in terms of reforms, and I so hope that Republicans will pick up this message and run with it, we've got to be for expanding the supply side. Go back to, the whole Reagan idea of being supply siders and say, look, we want to fix the incentives so there are more doctors, so there are more clinics, there are more imaging centers, there's more choice, more competition, so we can drive down prices and drive up quality at the same time. You're not going to get there through more government regulations or efforts at price controls. That's only going to backfire. So I don't know. I'm sort of rambling on you a little, Gerard.
No, it's fine.
I was trying to speak over that
great
child. But
so I'll share with you, and you're probably aware, here in the state of Mississippi, we are a state that still has significant onerous certificate of need laws on the books. Now, our legislature just acted to relax some of those for certain purposes, certain needs, especially in the Delta area of Mississippi, which is virtually a healthcare desert. We're really struggling to have accessible care in that part of our state. It's a poor part of our state, and it's a sparsely populated part of our state as well. It's also a part of our state where most of the patients are covered by Medicare, Medicaid, or they're uninsured. And so it's a toxic elixir, honestly, for providers, for hospitals. But we're hoping that will stimulate some investment to increase the access to care. For example, we have one OBGYN physician for like the 10-state area in the western part of our state. One. And, that's a pretty difficult deal when you're dealing with a pregnant, expecting mom. So we got that going on. We do have 5 providers that sell coverage in our ACA exchange, but honestly, Phil, their networks are weak, and most of carriers, I should say, that sell, most of the providers don't want to deal with them because it's a hassle, it's a pain. So we have one big carrier, just like is the case in most all states. It's Blue Cross Blue Shield in Mississippi. They've got about 85% of the commercial coverage here in the state, and it's because they've got the most robust network. Even though most people want more choice, the reality is providers want fewer. They only want to deal with one payer if they had their druthers.
Well, this is why I think you really need to have a lot more competition on the provider side as well. And I'm glad that they are finally relaxing some of those certificate of need requirements. This has been, it was actually federal government policy that created certificate of need. It was a Ted Kennedy law that required every state to adopt it, and it was repealed. But most states kept it even after the federal requirement ended, because what's happened is it's become a shield that the hospitals can use to prevent competition.
Absolutely.
And they also do have some legitimate arguments, because what they will say also is they'll say, look, if competitors can take the most attractive part of our business and we still have to take everyone, then that's going to mess up our economics. And then, they're typically, a lot of times they're big employers, and so they've got a lot of influence with the state legislatures. And so what I always say is, you can only benefit people if you have more choice and competition, if you peel that back. If you think you must subsidize, the sort of the safety net hospitals that do have to cover things, even if they're not economic, do it with direct subsidies. Don't do it by banning competition. Banning competition is the absolute worst way to do it. When you do it that way, everyone is worse off. And so I'm glad
100%.
To hear that you're making some progress on that.
Yeah, I certainly personally have been advocating for the full repeal of the CON program in the state of Mississippi. I don't think our Department of Health, who's responsible for administering their program, I don't think they'd be upset either, because it's a major ordeal. It's a huge investment just to submit a request to make these various investments that are subject to certificate of need approval.
And think about what that does to somebody who's considering opening a clinic. Now you fill out what it's going to cost you to do, and your timeline gets much longer. Your costs get much longer. Now you need lobbyists, all of this. So you just get much, much less supply. And at the end of the day, if we want healthcare to be less expensive, we have to have more supply. We have to have more providers.
Agree.
We have to reverse this consolidation trend that we've seen both on the insurance side and on the actual providers. So I am happy to hear that. But a lot of these policy problems are federal, and one of the big challenges that we have on healthcare is Democrats, every time they touch healthcare, they make it worse. They make it more concentrated, more consolidated. They give more power to the insurance companies. They've been one disaster after another. But they continue to have a political advantage on healthcare. And I think that's because Republicans don't even try to do anything. So people look at it and they say, oh, well, at least the Democrats are trying. At least they care. At least they're doing something. And so, I've really encouraged the Republicans to do a healthcare bill this year. I don't think they're going to listen to me, unfortunately. But it's not enough to have the right talking points and to talk about choice and competition, controlling their money to spend. They say all the right things, but they only say the right things when they're responding to what the Democrats are doing. They don't actually push their own positive agenda and enact these things, or they go far too infrequently.
It feels like it's a reflexive political response more than it is of any substance. Phil, we got a break on us right now. If you can hang on for another segment, it's a short segment, about 8 minutes. We can continue this discussion. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you'd like to see in a potential bill coming out of Washington from the Republicans to counter Democrat proposals. You good to hang on?
Yeah, no problem.
All right, Phil Kerpen, President, American Commitment, is on the line with us. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Nowadays,
we interrupt this program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go.
This is huge news. Huge news. You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. We're chatting with Phil Kerpen, President, American Commitment, talking about America's healthcare system. So, Phil, you were saying earlier that you'd like to see some reforms implemented. So we've evolved from, honestly, after the Affordable Care Act was passed, that gave rise to so many groups in the country, including kind of a rekindling of the Tea Party, and it was all generally based on that, as you recall, and the IRS wasn't wanting to grant nonprofit status to many of these organizations who just wanted to call attention to the government taking over the healthcare system, and they objected to that. And it seems like that in this 2016 presidential cycle, you remember everybody talking about, we're going to completely repeal the Affordable Care Act. I never believed that, by the way, but Ted Cruz literally started every speech with that. We're going to repeal every single word. Well, they've backed off on that. Now you don't hear calls for that. It's entrenched. And I don't see it going away anytime soon, but we can work around the edges and do some reforms.
Well, it's a real tragedy that Republicans couldn't agree on a single plan when they took the House, Senate, and White House in 2016. I remember very well that period, and I was very active in all of those efforts. And my favorite quote from when that happened, I remember Pat Toomey, the former senator from Pennsylvania, was asked why Republicans weren't ready with a plan, and he said, "Oh, we thought Hillary was going to win." And this was the,
That's right.
I think he was accidentally honest with the reporter who asked him that. He's like, wait a second, now I actually understand why they were so ill prepared for this moment. It's not that Republicans don't have health care bills. They've got probably too many of them.
Yeah, that's true.
They don't agree on them.
They don't agree. That's right.
And they don't come together on something. And, I've been working with a project that we call the Most Favorite Patient Project. If people want to look at mostfavoritepatient.org, I've been working with Steve Forbes and Tomas Phillips and more on that. And one of the things we've been trying to do is create a very simple checklist to judge Republican health and a lot of bills come at the end of last year when they were kind of, as always, they do healthcare bills when they're playing defense against the Democrats. The Democrats were trying to extend those supersized Obamacare subsidies from the pandemic, and Republicans weren't quite sure how to handle that. By the way, did you notice that those expired without any of the dire consequences? The media had been telling us what happened, and now we're 4 months into the year, and the supposed end of the world if those enhanced subsidies weren't extended has not materialized, and the Democrats just changed topics. Now they're talking about ICE instead, and they after shutting down the government for 6 weeks over we've got to extend these subsidies, they just switch to a different topic and don't talk about it. But if you look at to answer your question before we went to the break, you said what should be included in a bill, and my best answer to that is we've got this 5-point checklist, very sort of high-level conceptual checklist that we put together on that mostfavoritepatient.org, and people can look at it. But I can just read it off here. But it's pretty simple stuff that I think that most Canadians agree on. The first point is that healthcare dollars should follow the patient. So instead of employers and government agencies making the decision about how dollars are spent, everything should go into vehicles like HSAs and HRAs where you're in control and can decide where those dollars go. The second point is to have deregulation. So instead of just having one comprehensive Obamacare plans, you should have all kinds of different insurance and non-insurance products that those healthcare dollars can be used for, whether it's subscribing to a direct primary care or choosing, a catastrophic only type insurance or a comprehensive insurance. But that should all be opened up so that you have a wide variety of competing choices and people can choose. The third point we talked about a lot in the last segment is expanding the supply side. I think this is so crucial. None of the rest of this works if you don't do that. Yep. The fourth is price transparency. There ought to be a posted price on every healthcare service. If there isn't a posted price, we think it should be free. There shouldn't be, the vast majority of healthcare services are non-emergency. People should be able to shop for them. If we have more providers, that's great. But if nobody knows the price of anything, that's a problem. So price transparency is critical. And our last point is what we call cash pay parity. And this is really important. And this is if you do pay cash for a service, whether it's for a prescription or for a medical service, that should count towards your deductible and out-of-pocket limit. It should not be in addition to that. And that's, I think, why so many people don't even bother trying to negotiate a cash price, because they figure, hey, I'm going to have to spend through my deductible anyway. It'll just be whatever it is. And so that cash pay parity is really important. And those are our top 5. Obviously, there are a million other things in healthcare that's fixed, but those are our sort of top bullet points.
Gotcha. Well, we got to go, but one other thing that's been talked about that we can't get through is a site neutrality for Medicare reimbursement, right?
Critical. I put that as part of this idea of expanding the supply. Okay. We've got to get rid of this huge bonus that we pay if you get acquired by a hospital system. And hospitals are able to charge a site fee for every Medicare procedure. And think about what this does to a doctor that wants to stay in private practice. You don't want to sell out. Yeah. You want to stay in private practice, but you're being underpaid for every
make it work. Yeah.
And if you sell out, Medicare's going to pay more for every office visit.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They're going to be able to pay you more than you're able to pay yourself. That's so destructive.
We got to go. Phil, appreciate it. Enjoy the discussion. Great insight. Phil Kerpen, President, American Commitment. Take care, Phil. Thanks.
You too. Have a good one.
We're coming right back after Fox News Super Talk News.
Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transition now.
Now on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays, coming at you from the Element Wealth Studio on this
Good Friday Eve.
We're pleased to welcome now Bob Ghetti, the host of SuperTalk Eagle Hour. Hey, Bob, thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you, Gerard, very much for inviting me on your show. I appreciate it.
You bet. So we were just talking about it, quite the milestone, 10 years this week. Eagle Hour has been broadcast, and what a great job, Bob, you do with that. What do you think about all that, man?
Well, Gerard, it's been it's been a labor of love, continues to be. I've been real fortunate to have some great guys help me with the show from the start. Luke Johnson, Jim Taylor, Kelly Sanner, great guys here in this community, and the show's been really embraced by the people here in South Mississippi, and I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Steve Davenport for making all this possible 10 years ago. We went to him with an idea, and Mr. Davenport agreed that he thought it could work, and here we are 10 years later. So we've been really blessed, and we enjoy every single day we're on the air.
10 years, man. If you can make something work that long, that's a bit niche because you focus on one thing there, and you do it fantastically. But that just shows you that the show is popular, it's well received, and it's consumed by the listeners, by the audience that have a strong interest in Southern Miss sports. You do a great job with that. What's the outlook for the Eagles through the rest of the baseball season?
Well, as you know, they started out really good, 15-2. They've been 6-6 since then. They've hit a bit of a batting slump. A bit of a batting slump is not a great description. A real batting slump. But I know you have some baseball background, Gerard. You know batting slumps come and go. I anticipate they'll pop out of it. They have tremendous pitching, and I think they'll be just fine down the stretch. A little painful right now to fans who are used to winning almost every game, but you're a baseball guy. You know things come and go like that.
Man, for hitters and being a baseball guy and the father of a hitter, my son, first baseman, hitter, 4-hole guy, DH, when you get into a slump sometimes, you wonder, Bob, am I ever going to get another hit? I mean, it does enter your mind, and then all of a sudden it kind of happens accidentally. And you just have new life, and you're off to the races. That's usually what happens. It's very streaky, as you know.
Yeah, I've asked coaches in the past, Coach Berry, Coach Oz, how do you explain that, your team's hitting 325 and then they go in a slump, they're hitting under 200, and how do you get them out of it? And both have basically given me the same response. Well, if I knew the answer to that, Bob, I probably would never lose a baseball game. Gerard, I don't think anybody knows the answer, do they?
No, because it's so mental, as you know. I don't know that there's another game when your mindset and your mental durability and strength is at play so much. Maybe you could compare it to golf, tennis, sports that are competed individually. But let's be honest, there's an individual competition between the pitcher and the batter. That's what baseball is all about. So, and you're on the stage for everybody to see. It's not like football where you miss a block. You could probably hide that in a lot of cases unless it's out in the open field, or maybe something that was drawn up by the coach in basketball and you didn't execute that perfectly. The fans in the seats probably don't know a lot of that. But baseball, it's there for everybody to see when you're struggling at the plate or in the field.
Much more of an intimate sport. You get to know the players a lot better. Like you say, you can literally see their faces, where in football, you really can't do that. But, Gerard, we were talking on the show just this week. How remarkable is the state of baseball in the state of Mississippi?
Incredible.
3 nationally ranked junior college teams, 3 nationally ranked year in and year out Division I teams, Delta State, William Carey University. It's almost unexplainable, Gerard, the love of baseball in this state.
I totally agree. And I got to tell you, Bob, to a great extent, I attribute it to the strong youth programs that we have here in the state that all got really in full swing in the 90s. I mean, I was a part of that in a small way as a coach with these kids. You could just see this competitive baseball had strong interest in this state, and it is incredible today, and they're turning out these unbelievable baseball players at a young age and then advance to the college ranks, and I think it's showing on the field.
Well, it does, and here in Hattiesburg, I mean, we're 20 miles from Pearl River Community College, which is, I believe, ranked number 2 in the country right now. Jones Junior College is a perennial powerhouse, of course. Then you've got all the baseball on the Gulf Coast as well. So, but Gerard, is there a better sport? I mean, is it not the greatest of all American sports?
Always, absolutely, and it will be. So, what do you think, Bob, about the newfangled technology MLB's using in the umpiring process?
Well, some afternoons I'm watching the home plate umpire make calls against Southern Miss, and I think it would be a great idea to have the track man behind the plate. Have you ever had that feeling, Gerard?
Of course, but it can work against you too. All that stuff tends to even out. So, Bob, 10 years. What?
I don't know if you want to take the human factor out of it.
Agree.
There's so many traditions about baseball that are so wonderful, from the little kids with their gloves in the park to fans fussing at the home plate umpire. I mean, you'd be taking kind of a fun part out of the game if you took that away.
It's entertainment. It provides entertainment. Yeah. That's what sports is all about, and that's an aspect of the game of baseball that's just incredibly entertaining. There's no doubt about it.
Right.
All right, so 10 years, Bob. What's on the boards for the next 10?
Well, I think we're just going to keep rolling along. I recently retired as the manager of some of the stations down here, and again, Mr. Davenport, Kim Dillon stepped right up and came down, talked to me, said they wanted to keep the Eagle Hour part of the SuperTalk family, so I plan to continue to do that. Gerard, if I can take just a second, I do want to thank Jim Taylor, former kicker here at Southern Miss, was the original co-host of the show. My lifetime dear friend, Luke Johnson, who was with me for a really long time. Kelly Sanner, who is an extraordinary talent from a broadcasting standpoint, community standpoint. He's been with me almost the entire time we've been on the air. And then we're very fortunate now to have a young man named Dima Mixon who has joined the crew. And Dima is the sports editor of the Pine Belt News down here. So he really keeps up with all the stats and all the things us older guys maybe are not quite as good at. The Eagle Hour has been a success because of those guys and the great relationship with the university and the coaches and the players that have been on the show through the years. So our plan is to continue to do that as long as people want to listen to us, Gerard. And so far, they haven't given us any sign they want us to leave. So,
no, I don't think they will.
We plan to be on the air every day at 1 o'clock.
That is awesome. People thoroughly enjoy it. There's no question about that. And it's an additional dimension of analysis that you get beyond just game day. And, typically you just get a little post-game analysis and then you move on to the next one. But you guys really dig into all the details and all the nuances of the program. And like you said, you get members of the staff on the program as well. People love hearing that. You guys do a great job asking the questions people want to hear. So it's just fantastic. I think you're set for to keep on going, man. I really do, Bob.
Well, I thank you very much. We always look forward to working with you when you're down in the area. So hopefully Gerard will hook up with you real soon down here.
No doubt about it. Always love that as well, especially at the Armed Forces Museum. What a treat that always is to be there, and what a precious asset that is for the great state of Mississippi.
100%.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And I think there's talk about maybe relocating it, getting it a little closer to 49. Somewhere on the
I think that's going to happen, actually. I think they have the location picked out. The Armed Forces Museum sponsored the weekend game down here Saturday. Okay. They wear the old Camp Shelby uniforms and what have you. And I was talking to the director of the museum Saturday afternoon, and that's underway. I mean, that may be some time down the road. But they have the location picked out, and they are making plans. And that'll be great because if you've seen the museum, you know how awesome
it's unbelievable, it is. It's unbelievable.
But so many more people will see it when it's on Highway 49. And then I think the whole state will know what you and I know. That is a real hidden treasure
Incredible.
in Mississippi, the Armed Forces Museum.
First time I ever walked through it, and I got the personal guided tour there. Incredible. Just blown away. And we should be so proud of Mississippi's rich history in the armed forces, and it's totally showcased and captured there in that facility. It's an honor to do the show there, and you guys are right after us as always, and we enjoy that. Bob Ghetti, the host of SuperTalk Eagle Hour, has been our guest, celebrating their 10-year anniversary this week, and they're going to be doing a special 2-hour show tomorrow to celebrate. 2 hours, Bob. That's great. Appreciate you coming on, Bob. Congratulations, man. You bet.
Thank you very much for having me on.
We're coming right back.
Madison County's building the... Okay, is everybody ready?
I'm ready. Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Trailers for sale or rent, rooms to let 50 cents. No phone, no pool, no pets. I ain't got no cigarettes, but 2 hours of push and broom buys an 8 by 12 4-bit room. I'm a man of means by no means, king of the road. Third boxcar, midnight train, destination Bangor, Maine.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. A friend of mine sent me a text when we were talking about with Bob Ghetti about the game of baseball and just the game within the game, the competition between the pitchers and the hitters, and how hitters can go into slumps. And it's become such a mental thing. You wonder, are you ever going to get another hit? Because you just go up to the plate and time after time you do not succeed, meaning you don't get a hit. And so the great Greg Maddux, what a crafty pitcher he was back when pitchers focused on location, understood hitter weaknesses, and had an assortment of pitches. Just because pitching, as you used to tell the kids this all the time, it's all about getting the batter off balance. Now, overpowering a hitter with super high velocity, that gets them off balance. That's one way. That's more common today, as you know, but before there was such a focus on how dang fast can you throw it, you used lots of different pitches and lots of different locations. Maddux may be the best at that ever. I mean, he didn't throw it hard enough to break your nose, so relative to today's pitchers. But he was asked one time how he always manages to get the best hitters out, because he was known for that, just keeping them off balance, making them look silly sometimes, spinning in circles in the box. And he said, except for Tony Gwynn, and he used an expletive that starts with an F before the name Tony Gwynn, maybe the best hitter of all time, you could argue. Just pure hitter now. He said, that's a guy that doesn't suffer many slumps. I just always had a hard time. But that's what's so great about baseball is that game within the game, that mind competition. I'm going to try to throw it somewhere other than where you think it's coming. I got such precise control, I can do that. That would be an accurate description of Greg Maddux, which you've seen the stats on that, Rhino, the number of walks that he had over his career relative to strikeouts and ABs. It's unbelievable. I think he leads by a long shot in that category.
Yeah, and the conversation where he was talking about Tony Gwynn, he was talking about the limitations of the human eye.
Oh, okay.
And how he was convinced that there's not a single hitter on the planet that can tell the speed of a pitch with any level of accuracy.
Yeah.
Whether it's 55 or 65 or 75 or 85 miles an hour, there's just no way in the distance it travels from the mound to the plate to judge the speed of the pitch, except for Tony Gwynn.
Sadly, the great Tony Gwynn passed away 2014 at a young age, honestly, born in 1960, 54 years old. Hall of Famer known as Mr. Padre. I can still see him today. And that Padres, those were some ugly dang unis, weren't they? I can still see him today, but man, that guy owned you, generally speaking, when he stepped into the box.
There was another conversation, it was an interview Maddux was doing, talking about facing Jeff Bagwell.
Yeah.
And how he gave up and he intentionally threw a big juicy meatball right over the middle of the plate for Jeff Bagwell to get a home run on a certain count at a certain part of the game in the middle of the season, thinking they were going to face Bagwell again in the postseason, and Bagwell was going to be waiting on that pitch to get another home run and never see it again.
Exactly right. I mean, that's just how brilliant, if you think about it, Maddux was and used the mind aspect of the game. Again, not a guy that was going to blow you over with his speed. He didn't do that. Again, it's about keeping you off balance. Keeping you off balance. So, and he was a master at that. Maybe the best ever at keeping hitters off balance. And they're always guessing what the heck's coming and where's it going to be, more importantly. It seems like we've sort of abandoned the art of location to a great extent in baseball and opting more for I'm just going to throw it down the middle and blow it by you here.
I think it comes and goes in cycles.
Okay.
It's the cat and mouse game between the offense and the defense in baseball, between the pitcher and the batter. Nowadays you have a newer crop of young pitchers that have a lot of speed. And I believe as batters catch up to that, you'll see an uptick in more control pitchers or
you're right,
utility pitchers. Like you're seeing an increase in the use of the knuckleball in youth leagues and in lower levels of play, to a point where you'll likely see the major leagues have knuckleballers in the future, because if you have an Aaron Judge, just a monster specimen of a human being, versus a power pitcher, like just for example, like a Paul Skeens,
yeah,
then that's a lot of energy being transferred between the ball and the bat compared to Aaron Judge is used to hitting fastballs. That knuckleball wandering on him might be difficult for him.
Man, who could forget the great Phil Niekro, on the Braves? I mean, again, all about keeping you off balance. He'd have those guys turning circles in the box with that crazy knuckleball he had. What a master he was. It was fun to watch him, man, because he couldn't throw it 70 his fastball, and He literally used his knuckleball to get you off balance on his fastball. It's not the opposite that you get a traditional fastball breaking pitcher. That's their repertoire. No, he led with a knuckle and sprinkled in a fastball. And just as you think that knuckle's coming, here comes a fastball at 80, and they're late on it because they're expecting the knuckleball. Man.
And it might not even be something like the game itself adjusting with power hitters having to adjust or power pitchers having to adjust. It may just come down to human physiology. You're seeing it, or you've seen it somewhat in the past with the NFL, where you get to a certain point where you're reaching the limitations of what the human body can handle.
Yep.
Well, I mean, if you get pitchers that are learning at increasingly younger and younger ages to throw harder and harder, how many of them have the physiology of a Nolan Ryan and can do it for 40 years?
Another freak.
Or do they wind up burning out and you wind up with shorter pitching careers because of it, and then you'll see a change in the pitching? It's all cyclical.
You're right about that. And it's what makes the game great, because there's more than one way to skin the cat, as they say. Again, it's about getting you off balance, not blowing it by you, getting you off balance. You can be as off balance on an 80-mile-an-hour fastball as you can a 95 one. It's just that game that's going on. We're digressing a bit, but it's fun talking about baseball, and I know Bob Ghetti loves it as well. That team does a great job. I've listened to them several times before when they dig into that. I mean, they're good at analyzing all the sports, of course, for Southern Miss, the Golden Eagles. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say he really does enjoy talking about baseball. They got a great program, and he's right. We are blessed with world-class baseball in the state of Mississippi. There's no doubt about it. And you can see it at the ranks from the youth level through high school. Of course, our community colleges, as Bob pointed out, best in the country in that respect. And then our four-year schools all have great baseball programs, national championships among some of them. So incredible. There's a bill that we've been taking a look at that's gotten a lot in the state of Mississippi, a lot of attention. It's House Bill 1772. Richard Cross, the host of Mornings with Richard Cross, spoke to Senator Daniel Sparks about this. It was a conversation that the senator and I had a couple of weeks ago. And this legislation concerns how enrollees in the state's SNAP program, the food stamps program, have to report information to retain their eligibility or lose their eligibility for those benefits. Now, the benefits are paid for by the federal government until the One Big Beautiful Bill Act passed, in which case states' error rates are measured. They've been measured. The federal government measures them. There's a methodology, and errors just mean you're overpaying or you're underpaying based on a review of those who receive benefits in the reporting period, the period being audited. And as you can imagine, in most cases, there's overpayment, meaning you paid people more than they were entitled to, which could even mean that they're entitled to zero. But you still paid them. And it's all about all the eligibility data in the system that you use to determine benefits. Well, we'll get this on the other side of the break, but House Bill 772 this year sought to change the way that information is reported and considered because of something the One Big Beautiful Bill did when it was enacted last year. We'll talk about it on the other side of the break.
From thesebro.com.
Properly set all controls before recording.
All systems go.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Walking through a party in the county jail. The prison band was there and they began to wail. The band was jumping and the joint began to swing.
Welcome back, everyone. On today's episode of In a Mississippi Minute with Steve Azar, you'll hear from SuperTalk Outdoors host Ricky Matthews. You can listen to In a Mississippi Minute with Steve Azar today at 1 p.m. here on SuperTalk Mississippi. Don't forget, that we're going to be remote next Thursday, Middays with Gerard Gibert, April 9th from the South Highland Colony Parkway in Ridgeland. The Madison County Economic Development Authority will be discussing how they recruit and retain industries in the area, helping create thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in investment. On Wednesday, it's Sports Talk Mississippi on the road. They're going to be live at Scruggs Farm Lawn and Garden in Saltillo on Wednesday for their Drive Green Spring Sales event. Check out their green savings on John Deere zero-turn mowers with 0% for 36 months, Gators with 1.9% for 39 months, and compact tractors with 0% for 72 months, and other great deals. The C Spire text line, it's wide open at 601-879-4395. So before we went to break, I was reviewing this measure, House Bill 1772. This gets a little bit into the weeds, so bear with us here. We'll try to explain what's going on. So you know that when the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, also known as the Working Families Tax Cuts Act, that was signed into law by President Trump July 4th, 2025. That's the one that's got the deduction for tax purposes of tips and overtime, increase in the standard deduction for seniors, increase in the state and local tax deduction, reinstated the pass-through deduction for small and mid-sized businesses, and had some immediate expensing, a key provision, in my view, the most critical provision that serves as a strong stimulus to economic growth and certainly capital expense investment, and a number of other reforms to various federal assistance programs. One of those, of course, the food stamps program, also known as SNAP. Supplemental, what does it stand for, Rhino? Supplemental Nutrition
Assistance Program.
Assistance, yeah, okay. So pretty straightforward there. Well, some of the reforms there, as I recall, mainly centered around you got to now work to 65, as I recall. There's a work requirement. It's always been there, but the threshold for it was 60, I believe, and now that's been extended to 65. And there's some other reforms as well. The program's no longer available to certain classes of legal immigrants, not illegal. It's never been available to them, technically speaking, in accordance with law. But certain legal immigrants no longer eligible. But one of the key provisions that affects the states, including the great state of Mississippi, two things. One is that the administrative costs associated with the program, just the cost to administer the program. Well, up until the Big Beautiful Bill, that was a 50-50 deal. The Big Beautiful Bill put more of the cost burden onto the states. Actually, it was 75-25. I got it backwards. Pardon me. 75% of the cost covered by the federal government, 25% covered by the state. It changed it to 50-50. So there's some costs associated with administering the program that now the state of Mississippi is responsible for. Went an additional 25%, essentially, from 25 to 50. 50-50 split, federal-state. The other major provision is that the states would be responsible for covering a percentage of the cost of the benefits themselves, not the administration, the benefits, based on the error rate calculated by the federal government. And that gets a little wonky, but the bottom line is that the federal government has a methodology where they do a sample of your recipients and they audit those to determine, they do a lot of investigation into all the various eligibility criteria. It's mainly income, and that's based on the number of people in the household and the total amount of household income. It's a little difficult to obtain that information, as you can imagine, but that's what the law says as far as being eligible for SNAP benefits. And they do a sample, and they look at those to see hey, were they truly eligible, A, and B, if they were, did you underpay or overpay them? Well, it turns out that, as you can imagine, across the country, in general, the error rate calculated by the federal government shows that there's more overpayment than there is underpayment. Well, that, I think, stands to reason. But the federal government now says, hey, states, if you produce an error rate greater than 6%, you're going to have to cough up some money to cover the cost of the benefits. First time ever that the federal government has required the states, based on their error rate, to pitch in on the cost of benefits, not just administration, the actual benefits themselves. And there are three levels. I don't remember it off the top of my head. I just know that when you get, I want to say it's below 6, it's 0, 6 to 8, it's a certain amount, 8 to 10, it's a certain amount, and then you get over 10, I know this, it's 15%. 15% is what the states would be on the hook for. And the reason I know that one well is because Mississippi, unfortunately, falls into that category with an error rate of about 10.69%. So what that means is that the state of Mississippi, which received $840 million last year in federal SNAP benefits, would be on the hook for 15% of that based on our current error rate. You can do the math. That's $120 million that the state would have to cough up out of its funds to the federal government because of the error rate. So our goal should be to get the error rate down. Well, one of the reasons, this is where it gets really complicated, one of the reasons our error rate is high is because we adhere to a system known as change reporting for recipients, and that simply means that anytime there is a change in their status of data, of their personal situation that determines eligibility for benefits, they've got to let the state know. If they move, start a new job, even if they're earning the same amount, they've got to report these changes immediately. If there's a change in the number of people in their household, they've got to report these changes within 10 days, actually, but that's immediate. Mississippi's the only state that employs change reporting. The other reporting mechanism is known as simplified reporting. Well, they only report changes every 6 months. Now, the downside of that is you may have had a change right after the last 6-month check that renders you no longer eligible for benefits. But you're going to get them for 6 months until that 6-month, that interval crosses again, in which case you got to report that and you may be kicked off, may be disenrolled. But for that time period, you're getting benefits even though you're technically not eligible. So in the state of Mississippi in 2017, we passed law, again, implementing this change reporting system, and it's instead of simplified reporting every 6 months. So it's within 10 days of a change versus every 6 months. Mississippi adheres to the former. Only state in the country, by the way. Now, while that may reduce the number of people enrolled in the program to receive benefits, it increases the potential for errors because there's just more changes being made, and there's a lot more research being done on the part of the people administering the program at Human Services to record those changes. And when the federal government goes behind it, says, hey, wait, you got that wrong, boom, error, and that increases your error rate. Bottom line is our current system produces a higher error rate. It's widely thought that it does because you're just making more changes on a more frequent basis as opposed to this simplified reporting system. So this measure, 1772, would convert Mississippi's reporting mechanism to simplified. The idea being to reduce the error rate so that we don't owe the federal government, based on the current error rate, $120 million. We've been talking a lot on the program the last couple of weeks about how our costs continue to increase, our state spending, and that's going to become a budgetary challenge as we're watching our revenues potentially decrease. So this bill, on the other side of the break, we'll share it with you. I don't know that I've ever seen a history of actions quite as long as this one. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Poly up a Miss.
Check it out. Let's do this.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. Middays, final segment of Hour 2 on the program today. So this measure, HB 1772, which would convert Mississippi to be like all the other states with respect to eligibility in the SNAP program and reporting of the various changes in one's personal status and life events, if you will, that would change their eligibility. So this is something that the federal government considers an error. Rhino, this is interesting. If an applicant submits the wrong paperwork or forgot to write down their landlord's phone number so they can verify that, their house, their residence, that would be considered an error. So it's not that it costs more money or less money, but the federal government calculates that in the error rate. And so the more you're doing that, the more the opportunity is to commit these errors. And that figures into this potential cost we would have to bear of the benefits themselves. So the federal government says, hey, states, you better clean up your administration of the program. Quit making so many dang errors. You get over 10%, boom. You're responsible for 15% of the benefits. In the state of Mississippi's case, that would be $120 million of money we ain't got. So this bill went through the ringer, as they say. Conference reports, returned for concurrence on 312. So went from the House over to the Senate. Senate took it up, passed it as amended, and then the motion to reconsider entered, motion to reconsider table, return for concurrence, decline to concur, let's have a conference, name the conferees. And then they filed conference reports. Conference report adopted in the House, adopted in the Senate, and then another motion to reconsider. That's because it basically got amended to the point where the more critical provision of the measure was nullified. That's why it went through all this. And so Senator Daniel Sparks, he really has been a strong proponent of shifting Mississippi away from the current change reporting to simplified reporting process. It got reconsidered, recommitted, reconsidered, recommitted. I've never seen anything like this before. And then conference reports filed in the Senate, in the House, adopted in the House. And I don't know that I've seen this before, Rhino. The current status as of today, immediate release. I don't know that I'm familiar with that status. What does that mean exactly? Release to the other side? Not sure. So,
wouldn't that be to get it to the governor before they can sign it die?
I guess so, to speed it up. But I only see that the House has adopted the final conference report. I don't see in the list there that the Senate has. So the Senate is calling for, the House's action was immediate release. Maybe I'm missing something here. I don't see where the Senate has signed off on the final conference report. But that's That's what's going on. What a history. This would kind of hurt your brain figuring out all the procedural moves here on this piece of legislation. It seems like almost all of those available were utilized in getting this measure to where it is today. So I'm glad to see that the state is taking some action here. I do think that more frequent reporting of these life events does make sense as far as ensuring that, hey, if you've had a change, it could be as simple as you're looking for a job, right, and you qualify for the benefits, and boom, you got a job. And now you have a job that pays more than 130% of the federal poverty level, thus you're no longer eligible. Well, that could have happened right after, in a 6-month reporting interval, right after the prior 6-month reporting date, and you could be receiving benefits even though you're not technically eligible. Now, that wouldn't be viewed as an error because it happened between the reporting period. If you update it in the next reporting period, that would be consistent with the policy. So that's what's going on. So interesting measure, though, interesting legislation that is going down to the old wire, as they say, but certainly need to do something. Something really bizarre happened with respect to the birthright citizenship hearing from the Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Does anybody have a clue what she meant in this? And just hang on, folks. We got a break on us right now. We will share with you what she said. I couldn't follow it. I think the whole world's trying to figure out exactly what did the Supreme Court Justice mean in her statement here. Man, oh man. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Winter is here again, oh Lord. Haven't been home in a year or more. I hope she holds on a little longer.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays, live from the Element Wealth studio on this
Good Friday Eve.
Hope you're getting ready for a big-time Easter as we celebrate the resurrection of our good Lord this coming Easter Sunday. Of course, tomorrow, a somber day, Good Friday. But we all hold on to the hope that the good Lord will rise from the dead, as is in Scripture. And such great symbolism for life in general and how we cling to our faith and hope and prayer, that even when things are down, something good happens and gets us out of the doldrums.
Good Friday leads to better Monday.
Absolutely. So, Ketanji Brown Jackson, isn't she something? She says yesterday, with respect to this birthright citizenship case that we talked about yesterday on the program, this was to the U.S. solicitor that's arguing on behalf of the government. Your view of birthright citizenship turns on what the status of the parents is, not the child. Help us understand why we wouldn't see a mention of parents in the text of this amendment. And then she goes on to say, if I steal a wallet in Japan, this may be the most bizarre thing a Supreme Court justice has ever said. if I steal a wallet in Japan, I am subject to Japanese laws. In a sense, it's allegiance. What in the wide world of sports is she talking about? What does this have to do with birthright citizenship? Connect those dots for me, please. I can't. I just couldn't believe this came out of her mouth.
Seems like she's trying to play semantics word games with the language from the original language.
Well, is she trying to say that when a baby is born, people have to have documents to determine the newborn child is a citizen? Are we bringing in pregnant women for depositions now? Is that what's going on? I just couldn't understand it. It just feels like that sometimes discourse from the left just makes it look like they're pretending that they actually understand what they're talking about, which essentially renders fruitful discourse impossible. She's acting like questions answered is how we in a brief is how we determine the citizenship of parents in America. It doesn't make any sense. She's really counting on, I think, half the country just agreeing with her that it's impossible to know someone's citizenship after they give birth. I guess that's what she's trying to say.
Well, what you read from her statements was two different lines of questioning.
Yeah.
The first part, the part where she talked about your view of birthright citizenship turns on what the status of the parents is, not the child. Help us understand why we wouldn't see a mention of parents in the text of this amendment. That was responded to by the solicitor with the remark, something along the lines of, I think we know that newborns can't form domiciles.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Stephen Miller, of course, that works with the president there, he said birthright citizenship means the children of illegal aliens can vote to tax your children and seize their inheritance. I hadn't thought about that. Now, in my view, honestly, I do think that the justices, the Supreme Court, is likely to rule against the president's executive order. And I think they probably get it right in that respect. That being said, I think we need to do something in the law, right? Let's use the prescribed process that the Constitution grants us to enact law to address this issue. Now, I don't know, maybe that requires completely amending the Constitution. But it's a question of, can you enact law that would maybe put some additional criteria on the birthright citizenship issue and still be within the scope and the intent and the text, honestly, of the amendments. That's where it gets complicated.
Well, the only problem with that is, say next Congress comes in and they decide they're going to write a law that changes birthright citizenship. It's still going to get challenged. It's still going to go to the Supreme Court in this same way, and they would still rule on the constitutionality of that law versus the amendment.
Yeah. I get it.
So
Could be a conflict.
if they find a fault in the amendment with its current enforcement, that fault could be remedied by this challenge to the executive order without even having to include Congress.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's similar to the Roe v. Wade deal. So the Supreme Court essentially made law in Roe v. Wade by saying, the abortion is a right. It's protected.
Correct.
And the Supreme Court, several years later, from 1972 to whenever it was, 2 years ago, said, no, that's not what it says here in the Constitution. So I think they got that right from a legal perspective. And that's what their duty is to rule in that respect. Is this constitutional or not? Is this consistent with our Constitution? So what that did is simply send it back to the states. Say, there is no federal law. There's no federal or constitutional right to an abortion. Have at it, states. Do what you want within, of course, the boundaries of federal and state law. And that's exactly what's happening. It got sent back to the states. This could be a similar situation in that you may have some new law passed by Congress. Now, we should be clear on the Roe v. Wade deal. If Congress were to pass a law that made abortion a right, if you will, across the 50 states, and somebody challenged that, that's when the Supreme Court, I believe, would look and say, well, we have a federal law that was duly passed, right, and enacted through the correct process. So it's not like that it's a permanent ban on abortions in this country. It just reversed what was thought to be by this particular Supreme Court a wrong ruling by the Supreme Court that ruled the way they did on Roe v. Wade in 1972. So the Congress could still pass law, and the Supreme Court would have to uphold that because there's nothing the Supreme Court says, in the Constitution that says you can't do that. It is a matter for lawmakers. This is a little different in that you've got amendments in the Constitution. And so any laws you pass would have to pass that test. That's the whole point. The way I understand it of the Supreme Court, right? They're the interpretive body in their role as Supreme Court.
And that's what
justices.
I was saying about passing a new law is they would likely interpret it similar to how they're interpreting the constitutionality of this executive order.
I agree. And I think they're leaning towards, they're skeptical at a minimum, right? They're leaning towards ruling against the president's executive order. I'm not so sure that would be necessarily the wrong ruling. However, the question is, can we do something in law to prevent this birthright tourism matter that's going on in this country? You discussed it and explained it for our audience yesterday. China, for example. And then I pointed out there are cartels. You can go pay them, right, to get a pregnant woman into the country just before they give birth or at some point during their pregnancy. So they give birth and boom, they have a child that's a citizen in accordance with our Constitution. And unfortunately, there are people that are getting paid to facilitate that immigration into the country. That's with an E, immigration into the country. And then you pointed out that China is like a whole industry.
Oh, yeah.
Associated with that.
And you look at the current precedent of birthright citizenship was set in the late 1800s in a case regarding a Chinese citizen or a Chinese national that became an American citizen. And if you look at the ability to travel in that day and age, just use China for an example.
Yeah.
It would take 3 to 4 weeks of travel by ship to get from China to America in the late 1890s. Now it's a few hours by plane. So it could be up to the Supreme Court to determine the intent of the amendment and whether or not it was ever intended to be this blanket system.
It's one of those things that perhaps needs some updating based on modern times versus when these amendments became amendments in the Constitution. By the way, Attorney General Pam Bondi is out. We'll cover that in the next segment. Stay with us.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Yes, the news is out. Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, has been relieved of her duties. I think a lot of people thought this was coming. She's moving to the private sector. That's what she has told various news outlets. Todd Blanche serves currently as the United States Deputy Attorney General. That's the number 2 position in the DOJ. Is going to serve as the interim AG. lots of buzz and rumors that Lee Zeldin, he's currently EPA Secretary, EPA Administrator, or is he Secretary of EPA? I think I got that right.
Yeah, he's the administrator of the
Administrator,
EPA.
okay. Administrator, right. He seems to be the front runner to replace Attorney General Bondi. Now, this moving to the private sector sounds like they're trying to at least present it as if it was a decision that she made. I don't want to work in government anymore here, Mr. President. I want to go back to the private sector. I'm thinking it was a little more mutual in nature. Pure speculation on my part. But that's the big news out of Washington, D.C. right now. I do need to clarify something that I've been talking about, and that's this HB 1772. I appreciate Senator Daniel Sparks for communicating with me via text here. Just wanted to check in on this bill. This is the one we were talking about earlier that if the amendment, as Senator Sparks offered. And so, by the way, this is the way the sausage is made. Help me out here, Rhino. But this bill simply extended the repealer on essentially funding the Department of Human Services. And so that's a pretty critical piece of legislation because it means no DHS if they don't extend it. Well, the senator, knowing that, inserts an amendment, which is related, of course, because the program's administered by DHS, talking about the SNAP food stamps program, that would change the way, the methodology used for recipients in the SNAP program to update their personal life change information that is used to determine eligibility for benefits in the program. Well, he just informed me that, that conference report did not include his amendment. So it's moving forward, but without that amendment. So our current system will remain in place, our change reporting system, which is whenever a life change occurs for any of these recipients, they are required by state law to let DHS know it. How many of them you think actually do that? I'm not sure. But nonetheless, and there, by the way, there are third-party private sector tools that are available that could be used by the Department of Human Services to determine, at a minimum, income. Also could be used to determine address as well, to verify that, because that's a critical part of it, because benefits are based on the household income, and you often have situations where you don't know who lives in the house. Or the people that live in the house, when you combine their income, that totals to a figure that exceeds the eligibility threshold, because it's based on household, not individual income. So, nonetheless, this looks like where we're going. He also informed me, by the way, that he made several calls to our Washington delegation yesterday for some clarification, and also requested that the state of Mississippi be granted an exemption from this new requirement in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, where states are going to have to pay part of the benefit cost if their error rate exceeds 6%, and there are three levels, 6, 8, 10. So, Rhino, as you were telling me on the break, this Alaska exception granted as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act literally spells out explicitly the state of Alaska as being exempt from this new test, is because that's how they essentially bought Senator Lisa Murkowski's vote necessary to pass the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. We could refer to it as the Alaska Purchase, if you will. And that harkened me back to the Obamacare era, where I can't remember who it was in the Senate at the time whose vote was needed to get Obamacare over the finish line. And they made some special exceptions for the state of Nebraska, and I believe that was famously called the Cornhusker Purchase or something to that effect.
Yeah, it was Nebraska Senator Ben Nelson.
Ben Nelson
got a specific carve-out in Obamacare known as the Cornhusker Kickback.
Kickback, that's right, yeah. Of course, somewhat modeled after the famous Louisiana Purchase, but they called it the Cornhusker Kickback. Thank you. Do remember that. So that's what's going on there at the state. Wanted to pass on.
And even after Murkowski got the carve-out for Alaska, she was quoted as to saying it was agonizing to vote for the one.
She sure did. I remember. Yep. And I know everybody says, well, you know, why didn't she be more adherent to the Republican policy agenda? It's because she can be. She happens to represent a state that keeps sending her back. And it does make you wonder, how come you're not more aligned with the conference in general of Republicans in the Senate? She and Susan Collins from Maine, they're always the ones you got to worry about. Anytime the Republicans are trying to push something through, it's a hard sell on them because they tend to lean more towards Democrat policy. You just have to be honest about it. But that's probably the best you can do in Maine and Alaska. They keep getting reelected. And they've been challenged by people who are more to the right, more conservative, more aligned with the Republican platform, but they don't seem to prevail. On the C Spire text line, I'd say she's aligned with her state. It's certainly fair to say that. And let's see, if I recall, Rhino, she became a senator because there was a Republican senator that perished in a plane crash. Do you remember that?
Yeah, wasn't it her dad?
Was it her dad? Okay.
I think it was her dad.
Okay. I just remember the incident in general, and that's how she landed that gig. Peter Ducey reporting Bondi is taking another position in the administration, and so the news I'm seeing is that, this is on the C Spire text line, she's returning to the private sector. Not sure. Kenny in Wayne County says we need to repeal the amendment and change the law so they would have to be in the USA legally for 1 calendar year before being born. I hear you, Kenny, but repealing an amendment or amending the Constitution is what would be required there. Is an extremely tall bar, and high bar, I should say, tall order, high bar, as the metaphors go, and that's intentional. That was the idea from the framers. We're going to make it really hard for you to amend this framing document, this fundamental legal lawmaking shower, if you will. It pushes all the laws out rooted in that particular document. It's just hard. 3/4 of the states, right, Rhino, I think, to ratify the Constitution. I want to say that 2/3 of the Congress to propose an amendment. It's a 2/3 threshold and a 3/4, right? 2/3 to get it to be considered, 3/4 to ratify. I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So no matter, super high bar, 2/3, 3/4. Not likely. But I agree. It feels like something needs to be done because
I'm trying to remember what the weird one was with ending prohibition. There was something odd about that ratification, but it's not coming to mind at the moment.
Ben from Madison, she was absolutely awful. Zeldin will do a much better job. He thought to be the replacement at this point. Yeah, we're watching all that for sure. John and Pontotoc, too many bought-off politicians by China. Well, I don't know, John, because as Rhino was pointing out, there's just really no easy avenue to amend the Constitution here, to do what's necessary to stop this birthright tourism, as it is referred to.
I found it. It was the 21st Amendment repealing prohibition, which was the 18th Amendment, was the only ratified amendment to be ratified by state conventions instead of state legislatures.
Okay, gotcha. Interesting.
I knew there was something weird about it.
How about it, which is one of the avenues, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the only time it's been used.
Gotcha. Interesting. You feel like, though, this old Ketanji Brown Jackson that many refer to as a DEI appointment, she may be doing more single-handedly to dismantle, shall we say, the tyranny of DEI than anybody else in the country. I mean, she's really showing.
That was one of the interpretations of the 8-1 decision on the Colorado deal, was you had even the more liberal justices not willing to side with her dissent.
Unbelievable. Well, coming right back, folks. Stay with us.
From the Seabrook.com.
Come on. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. There behind the glass stands a real blade of grass. Be careful as you pass. Move along, move along. Come inside, the show's about to start. Guaranteed to blow your head apart. Rest assured, don't get your money's worth. Wait this show, it happened, alright. You gotta see the show. It's about to move. You gotta see the show. It's rock and roll. Oh, right before you.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. Once again, congratulations to Bob Ghetti and the SuperTalk Eagle Hour. Bob, of course, the host, joined us earlier on in the program today. 10th anniversary. And they're doing a 2-hour show tomorrow to celebrate.
And quick correction on Murkowski, as much of a train wreck as she is, a wreck did not bring her into power. It was her dad.
Okay.
Her dad was the sitting senator from Alaska, was elected to be the governor of Alaska, and as governor, he appointed his daughter to his old Senate seat.
Ah, gotcha.
That was the controversy.
So then she didn't replace Ted, was his name, Stevens, I think? Didn't replace him when he perished in middle 2000s, 2010, something like that? Okay, so I had that wrong. She was not the appointment to replace him.
And the only other factoid about her time in the Senate has been she managed to wage a write-in campaign and succeeded. And she's only the second senator to do so after Strom Thurmond.
I do remember that now. Now that you mention it, I do remember the write-in campaign she waged. JR in Starkville asks, is the reporting procedure talking about this reporting process to the Department of Human Services for the food stamps program? Ask, is it state statute? If not, why can't the boss, I presume DHS, that would be the executive director, it comes under the governor, that's correct, direct the change? Yeah, it actually is statute, just so you'll know. And typically that's the case. So sometimes you'll have law that empowers an agency head, if you will, to develop those procedures. In this particular case, because there's so much money involved here, and it does have to comply with federal guidelines, et cetera. In fact, that is in statute. And if I'm not mistaken, just researching that many years ago, it seems like the federal government requires states to pass law that prescribes the reporting methodology. So Blake in the Delta points out, just the beginning of offloading federal programs onto the states. Yesterday, I saw an interview. It was actually the president's speech. I think, was it the Iran speech? I don't think so. That wasn't last night. I think it was the day before, where he was doing a presser, being interviewed. It was some event.
He gave a speech yesterday afternoon.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking about. Seems like it was yesterday. And he did say, we don't have money for daycare, Medicare, Medicaid. We're a big country fighting wars. He says the states can handle all that too. He also said, and it might mean they have to raise taxes. He literally said that. You know, this is what I've been saying as well. I've made this crazy proposal. Let's just send Medicaid down to the states. Let the states deal with it. That means you'd have to come up with the funding. And you would, of course, design the program as you see fit. Right now, that program, for the most part, is designed by the federal government. You've got some leeway, some latitude at the state level on the eligibility criteria, but within certain parameters and constraints and how you administer the program. And, of course, the states can choose whether or not they want to participate in so-called Medicaid expansion. But the base program, every state participates in. And, of course, it's a jointly funded program. It's just an example. But I agree with you, Blake. That was pretty clear coming from the president. We can't keep paying for all this. We've got to send this down to the states. I've made the statement here on the program. If the federal government balanced its budget by eliminating many of these federal assistance programs and by curtailing the amount of money it sends down to the states for education, for health care, if it did that, every state's budget would crash. Transportation infrastructure, huge spending. I actually find that to be more of a core function of government. But we're able to balance our budget because the federal government doesn't. That's just a fact. And the latest data is out showing that we're headed for another $2 trillion deficit again in this country this particular fiscal year. And the outlook calls for more $2 trillion plus deficits for as far as the eye can see. But, yeah, I agree, Blake. That was a statement made by the president. Blake goes on to say, I wonder if they want federal taxes to go to anything besides the military. Well, I believe that the tax system at the federal level in particular should be structured so that it generates the necessary revenue to fund the constitutionally appropriate functions of government. Now, I get it. You know this, Rhino. The Democrats will argue till the cows come home, and some Republicans as well, about the constitutionally appropriate. That could be deemed as somewhat of a subjective debate. So they may say, oh, no, Medicaid, that's constitutionally appropriate. Right? They may say that. That's just one example. There are numerous others. But I believe a core function certainly is to ensure that the country is protected from enemies, both internal and external. Domestic and foreign, I think, is the language is used. But, yeah, that's definitely, this could be the start of a trend. And we're just talking about how the federal government in the bill that passed last year says, hey, look, states, you make errors in your SNAP program, you're going to have to pay for some of it. Derrick and Greenwood asked the legislature why they let the bill die in committee to change it. It is a bizarre sequence to that measure. When we looked it up, it's a long list of all the things. And Senator Sparks called me after his interview with Richard yesterday because I was curious. I sent him a note saying, give me the update on this thing, man, because I'm worried that we're not taking any action to avoid what could be a $120 million bill that the state would have to pay in a couple of years. So just so you'll know, this went into effect talking about this error rate calculation and the associated penalty or requirement that the states cover a percentage of the benefits. That went into effect last October 1, 2025, the beginning of the 2026 fiscal year. But the first bill, is not due until 28. That's where we stand. Alaska got an exception, however. Senator Sparks says he's in touch with our delegation to say, we think we're going to stay at this 10%. I think that's his message. We're going to stay at this high error threshold, and that means we're going to have to hit the hip for a bunch of money, and we don't want to do that. Ben from Madison said she was awful talking about Pam Boddy. Zeldin will do a much better job. He seems to be a quality individual. Rhino, I think you're giving her too much credit. I think she's dumber than a bag of hammers. Got it.
But that is the way both sides, depending on what is before the Supreme Court, but that's the way they tend to argue, is they try to wordsmith a new definition for a word that's got its own already set in stone definitions.
Agree. Mose says, by the way, Gerard, everyone knows the 14th Amendment was meant to make former slave citizens. It was never meant for the purpose the left has been using it for. I agree. There are a couple of other amendments as well, though. I don't remember the exact number and what they all say. I don't have that sitting in front of me that address this issue. But I agree, Mose, that certainly with respect to the 14th Amendment, that is definitely the case. This is on the C Spire text line. Donald in Oxford just got done listening to a Massachusetts litigator give a talk on the upcoming Supreme Court decision on glyphosate. She said she knows RFK personally and said he is super corrupt and he has a tapeworm in his brain. Said she is rooting for the tapeworm. She had the room of 100 plus rolling in laughter. Oh, geez. Man, oh, man. On the C Spire text line, Gary in Meridian, I love the looks like an AI-generated meme there. Now that Artemis 2 is launched, we have 9 days to get every person on Earth a Planet of the Apes costume so we can pull off something absolutely hilarious when the astronauts return. That is pretty cool. It is it's an image of one of the characters in Planet of the Apes that's doing a selfie, holding a cell phone up towards a mirror to capture it. Looks like they're standing in a typical living room with sofas and family photos and wood-floored carpet on it, coffee table and so forth. That's pretty cool, Gary. Appreciate that. Joey the trucker, and just think that's $120-something million every year. People don't realize that. Talking about the SNAP penalty. Look, I hope it's not lost. Even if we stay with the current reporting system, we certainly could improve our administration to lower our error rate. That's what we're going to have to do to avoid this. But right now, Senator Sparks is reaching out to our delegation. Coming right back, final segment.
For a flipping good time, Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so
awesome. On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
My daddy spent his life looking up at the sky. He cussed, kicked the dust, saying, son, it's way too dry. The clouds up in the city, the weatherman complains. But where I come from, rain is a good thing.
Yeah, just to review the big news this morning coming out of Washington is that Attorney General Pam Bondi is no longer the Attorney General. Now, Rhino found a report from the UK. Which one of those publications?
Yeah, the Daily Mail has reporting from an insider, supposedly, that says Pam Bondi reportedly begged to keep her job in an intense showdown after being accused of a, quote, unforgivable offense, end quote, by Trump. And the unforgivable offense is supposedly Bondi leaking details of a pending document release to Democrat Eric Swalwell about his previous relationship with Fang Fang, the alleged Chinese spy.
I would say that's unforgivable, honestly. CC in Senatobia said, I think it's because she wouldn't say, I'm Bondi, Pam Bondi. That's awesome. Gary and Meridian, now that he already told us about that. That was great. Thank you for that, Gary. I missed that. The Planet of the Apes. That's really good. I remember when I was a kid going to see those movies. They kind of freaked me out a little bit originally. They
just got weirder over time.
Yeah,
the first one was weird enough, but then the second one and the third one.
That's right.
Which one was it where they were in the bombed out subways and there was the cult worshiping the big nuke?
Oh yeah, I love that.
Beneath the Planet of the Apes, was that it?
Worshiping the bomb.
Yeah,
remember? They were all in the white. Remember that?
Because Charlton Heston showed up for like 5 minutes in it and got killed, and then his cousin or something that had gone looking for him was the main character.
And they had hijacked the Lord's Prayer, as I recall, right? And they turned it into a prayer worshiping the bomb, Almighty Bomb. Oh my God!
Yeah, because spoiler alert for a movie older than I am, but didn't the bomb go off at the end? Like, wasn't that the big deal? Like,
that was the whole deal.
Boom, and then it's over.
Exactly. And
I just remember the marathons that would come on TV, like with TBS or TNT or something, and they'd play them all out of order, just confusing the heck out of young me.
Oh, yeah. But the image of him when he went back to Earth, he was on the beach, right? And you got half of the Statue of Liberty poking up there on the beach. That's pretty ominous.
Oh, yeah.
View that. Brilliant, though. You have to give it to, especially.
Great twist ending.
Especially if you think about the time period to make that kind of imagery in a movie was pretty neat.
Then you had, what was it, Battle for Planet of the Apes, where they were all in like prison suits?
Yeah, I think that's right. And of course, he
riding on the campus of, was it UCLA or something?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. That was awesome. So Pam Bondi is out, and we don't know who's coming in. All we know is we have an interim in the meantime, but it is widely believed that it's going to be Lee Zeldin. In the meantime, there's concerns in the markets about how long this war is going to go on. And there are some predictions that oil could track all the way up to about $150 a barrel. That would not be good. That means gas $6 a gallon, roughly, and diesel much greater than that. But I think that's just because the president didn't offer any details. I'm thinking as far as when we may be out of there and when it might end, I think that was purposeful, is my take on it. By the way, under the Trump tax cuts, you should know, the percent of taxes, total taxes paid by the rich actually increased. So the Democrats ought to be happy with that. Now, I have concerns, honestly, even though I support this policy, that it actually did take more people off the tax rolls, meaning fewer people have skin in the game. And we shifted more of that burden onto the wealthy, which is what the Democrats, that's their wet dream, honestly. But it's never enough, of course. And they're really running this particular cycle, it seems like, on taxing the rich. State of Washington just finally enacted tax law, new tax law. Make over $1 million, you got to pay 9.9%. Running off the millionaires, essentially, is what they're doing. The president, of course, trying to sell the war on the American people last night. Again, I thought he did pretty well at that. But he stopped short of telling us when he thinks we may be out, and actually said that, this thing is going to go on pretty intensely for the next 2 to 3 weeks, and that spooked the investment community, and I think people, and it made the price of oil go up. Really no clear understanding of where that's going. By the way, it's up $11.70 today to $111. So it's on up there. Expect price at the pump to rise even further as a result. Man, I pray that we can get a swift conclusion to this craziness and rid the world of this menace that is Iran and their cult-like regime, and never have to worry about that again, and get back to business, making America safer and more prosperous. Thanks for joining us today. Have a fantastic Easter weekend. We'll be back with you on Monday. Until then, stay safe and God bless.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.